Hello and welcome to today's webinar discussion, which is on data-driven telecom, rethinking database technology platforms for a distributed future. My name is Jeremy Cowan. I'm the founder and editorial director of Vanilla Plus, and I am delighted to be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us around the world. We're really pleased to have you here and to say that this webinar is brought to you thanks to our sponsors, Couchbase. And we're also supported today by independent analysis from Appledore Research. Now, it's no secret that communications service providers or CSPs have seen previously secure revenue streams being eroded in recent years. They've had to rethink what customers want and even where they will go to get it. Service providers can face small profit margins and unpredictable revenues, but they still have to invest heavily in R&D. And the pandemic has also placed huge demands on CSPs as consumer behavior has changed. So let's meet our distinguished panelists who are going to look at the changes ahead. In order of appearance, they are ESIM, Principal Analyst at Appledore Research. He has more than 25 years experience in telecoms and software, ranging from OSS and BSS through to telco cloud, 5G, edge networks, digital twins, and innovation models. It's great to have your input, Francis.
Hello, Jeremy. I'm glad to be here.
And thank you. Our keynote speaker today is Chris Bridgeland. Chris heads up Couchbase's solutions engineering teams in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So a warm welcome to you too, Chris.
Super. Thanks a lot for hosting us today, Jeremy. Much appreciated.
Good to have you here. Thank you both. Now, don't forget, everyone, as always, the webinar is being recorded and you will be able to stream it tomorrow from vanillaplus.com. It's really important to us to find out what you're thinking. So in a moment, we'll be asking for your thoughts in our totally anonymous live poll. Remember, no one can see your individual answers, just the overall picture, and we'll show you the results immediately. Later on, after we've heard from our speakers, I'll be putting your questions to them. And if you've already submitted a question, thank you for doing that. If not, send us your questions right now via the questions tab at the top right of your screen. And if you haven't already located it, there is an arrow at the top right of your screen which says show sidebar. And in that, you'll be able to find both the chance to ask your questions and you'll be able to see the polls. So that's the most important thing. We want to know what you're thinking. And we'll also, as I say, be discussing your questions at the end. You can send your questions to us at any time throughout the rest of the hour. And any, of course, that we don't get to, if time doesn't allow, we will pass on to our speakers to answer offline later. Now, let's have a look at our poll. The question that we want to ask is this: do you believe the pandemic has sped up the rate of digital transformation within telcos? The answers are no, it stayed the same, maybe it sped it up a little, or it has sped up a large amount. So, do you believe the pandemic has sped up the rate of digital transformation within telcos? A little, a large amount, no, or it stayed the same? Keep sending us your votes and we'll keep an eye on that. But already we're starting to see a pattern emerging. Chris, coming to you first, we're seeing most of our delegates are saying they think that the pandemic has sped up the rate of digital transformation within telcos a little, with a significant number showing a large amount. Was your expectation ahead of this?
Well, from my side of things, I think we've seen, well, let's take a step back. When we entered into the pandemic, I think nobody knew what was going to happen. But if you look at the services that people relied on, telcos were front and center of providing that beyond obviously our food and water from supermarkets and everything else. But in essence, the telco connectivity, the ability to get online, do your internet shopping and other aspects associated with that, as well as running sessions where we're all remote like we are today, doing these sorts of things. Telco requirements have needed to either beef themselves up or boost their their application portfolio to basically meet demands of people now working in a very dynamic way. So all of the conversations that we've certainly had on the telco side of things have really accelerated this last year. We've been doing a lot more with telcos certainly this last year than I suppose it would be a relatively comfortable progress, and now has accelerated quite hard. So I see this actually lining up quite nicely with what we see.
That's very encouraging. Francis, does this meet your expectations?
Yes, yeah, I think it's the key thing is that it is having a driving effect. I think one of the things about the pandemic was, as Chris said, the telcos kind of kept the lights on. The networks survived. We all went home. We all started working like we are today, and using the internet. But I think at the same stage, there's an underlying realization that telcos haven't necessarily made more money by that effect. Yes, we're all working from home. We're all using our broadband connections, but there isn't necessarily any added value there, so that we've kept the lights going, but it's all very well keeping the lights going, but you're still a commodity. And I think that's where much more of the drive to digital transformation will be required, and the pandemic is a driving force there.
That's really interesting. Well, God bless the telcos for keeping the office lights on, as it were. But as you say, we do need to address the fact that it hasn't really resulted in significant increase in revenue, not in that sense anyway. Thank you both for that. It's time for me to hand over to you, Francis. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. So just a little bit of context on Appledore Research. We're very much focused at what I would term is the boundary between IT and telco. And we have a particular angle on the opportunities and challenges that the increased it's a horrible word, but the softwareization of the network brings. And we fundamentally believe that data is central to obtaining that opportunity. Just a little bit background, I've been delivering telco OSS inventory systems for a large part of my career, which has always been a very traditional repository of data in a telco. But the software-based network really kind of collapses that traditional data silo, like inventory. Things aren't necessarily inventory, they aren't necessarily network, they aren't necessarily customer data. It's all becoming a lot more mixed. And in this, I'm going to look a little at the challenges that the telcos face, just like we've been looking at in terms of the poll, and how this breaking of data silos will allow telcos to become effectively much more data driven on that. So let's first look at why does telco need to change. Firstly, telecom is a really expensive, costly business. The spend of telcos is in the kind of $1.5 trillion annually across the globe. And at the same time, these networks aren't actually getting any easier, they're getting larger, and they're actually getting more complicated. So telcos have an inherent need to drive down their costs and to invest in projects that will give them tangible benefits in terms of creating cost savings. But the second and possibly more important one is they need to create new value. I've already mentioned with the poll that additional value hasn't necessarily came to the telcos. And telecom for some time has been really desperate to find new ways of creating revenue. Data is now largely unlimited in a lot of parts of the globe. Broadband you can regard as a bit of a commodity, and lots of the services that telcos used to value add are now increasingly free as part of other platforms. So we see, you know, the telcos need to create new value. They might get that by to other markets and buying companies in that market, but it's probably just as important in terms of providing a better reason for customers to stay with you and for customers to switch to you. You know, compelling services like 4K video or better home security or enterprise wireless, or it could be just something as simple as a tariff recommendation based on who you are, where you are, and how you use mobile data. But underlying all this is the telcos can't live against the sort of static world. They've got other factors to deal with. New technology is needed. Regulators are often changing rules, and they're quite stringent about the policies of data gathering or retention of data within networks. And the sort of demands of what the customers want. We're all demanding sort of seamless broadband coverage, work from home environments, and you know, largely enterprise customers are demanding a lot more of the telcos. So both in terms of creating value and cost savings, again, I'll stress the point: data will be a critical enabler of both of those opportunities. So very simplistically, there are four potential really big data-driven opportunities we see in telco. The first is transformation. The need to reduce costs, particularly OpEx, sort of drives a need to kind of change the underlying systems that have run networks for time, be they CRM, be they OSS and BSS systems. The cost of ownership of those core systems needs to be driven down, particularly particularly in terms of licenses, but also in terms of their ability to scale to different data flows. Second, with 5G, there is a degree of hype with 5G, but 5G does bring a whole set of new data that will allow networks to actually be a lot more efficient if that data can be processed in time and managed in time. So you're likely to see much more telemetry from network equipment, meaning a huge increase in the data to be managed and that needs to be made sense of. Thirdly, edge cloud. The idea that we've taken centralized functions and can now put them much closer to user and to provide better experience. This, however, does create extra complexity in terms of data. You need to manage security profiles at the edge. You need to manage workloads more dynamically so that you can distribute applications and tune them to where you place workloads and the data to support them. And finally, IoT. IoT is actually fundamentally about the value that can be derived from data. IoT is data. So that could be monitoring equipment to ensure it's working correctly, or cleverly combining data from different equipments at a location to make an intelligent decision. And that data is going to be very varied. It's going to vary from real-time video streaming of images, for example, maybe to monitor a production line, or a simple environmental application that is capturing small amounts of data, but on a regular basis. Again, all of these are dependent on how well you can manage the data, store and distribute it. I guess you can say cloud has changed everything, but I think it's important to stress how it is changing it. Cloud has changed the legacy picture of what you would expect a database platform to perform and do. Cloud is meaning that increasingly data centers that we traditionally had within our environment are being moved into increasingly private, but actually much more importantly, public clouds. So the core applications that we described before, OSS, BSS, CRM and stuff, they are moving into the cloud. 5 years ago, it's something you would not have expected. They are on a steady transformation into the cloud. And at the same time, the network functions that would have typically been on hardware on dedicated hardware are increasingly becoming software applications that can be deployed on any hardware. The second thing is that compute resource is not having to be centralized in the data center anymore. Many good reasons for that. You can give a customer a better experience and reduce costs if you could be more responsive and intelligent using data and data closer to where that customer is. And increasingly, application experience isn't just dependent on the application, it's dependent on having the data in the best place to support that application. And that will vary from application to application. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk through a little bit of the some examples of that. So at the edge of the network, starting at the edge of the network, the data you collect and send back to a central data center. It might need to exist on its own. You might not be connected. Smart home applications do get disconnected. Smart factory needs data to be available for remote devices, and security video feeds. The more I can process the data locally, the better I can make the experience. Otherwise, you're just going to weigh down the internet. Moving up the chain a little bit, caching functions will. We're already very familiar with the idea of content delivery networks, but now you're increasingly going to get the same for software applications themselves, where you distribute functionality around the network and the data that supports them in order to give a better experience. In 5G, greater intelligence is possible if you can better understand how the network is performing. So you can use data from cell sites to self-optimize at the cell site. You can use the data if, for example, if a cell site isn't carrying much traffic, then power it down and let neighboring cells take that coverage. And back in the data center, there are still those centralized applications to run of aggregating the network data, looking at patterns of failure, and ensuring the security of devices on the network. And right out at the edge, on the devices themselves, data that helps diagnose problems on the device might be interesting. And again, I stress that even if that device is not connected. So there's a huge amount of data that can be on the device, like the data time, geolocation, user behavior that could be useful. So driving this way, telecom needs to move from a centralized data to a much more distributed data. In many aspects, the network has always been that distributed data, but now all that data needs to be brought together to deliver business goals. And again, how you handle that data is fundamental to how telcos can grab the opportunity from data. So let's look finally at sort of this, what are the data management capabilities that telcos should be looking for or demand. Broadly, they fit into three categories, although we've listed a lot more of them here. Fundamentally, they're about flexibility, the ability to handle the data variety and also the compatibility of data between different sources. They're about distribution, the ability to cache, distribute data between caches, and to replicate data between caches. And finally, scalability, and that's scalability both in a technical sense, but probably much more as important is in an economic sense. Can I scale at a cost that makes economic sense for the business application that I'm trying to manage? So in conclusion, for where the telecoms need to be or want to go, the differentiators telcos want to create, it's about putting the right data in the right place at the right time. And by right place, we mean applications in a distributed environment. By right time, we mean fast enough to make for a better experience. And finally, underpinned by at the right cost. The thing has to be economic and to deliver the benefit. Okay. So thank you. And with that, I'll hand over to Chris.
Super. Thank you, Francis. Thanks for the nice entry point into the conversation for me. So for this part, we're really picking up on some of the themes that Francis had sort of highlighted. Some of you may not know Couchbase. I'll do a little bit of an introduction to Couchbase as we kick in, but hopefully give you some examples of what we're doing. But ultimately, taking that last slide that Francis showed, obviously with regards to those categories, the capabilities and the benefits that people are looking at. And when we look at our feature and functionality, Couchbase is a database technology. It's a NoSQL technology, which No stands for not only SQL. So NoSQL technology. I would say nearly everybody is most probably using us on a day-to-day basis without realizing it. Companies like LinkedIn. If you use LinkedIn, you're using Couchbase. Couchbase's user profiles and other things that are all set behind it. But equally, if you're using quite a few of the services inside some of the large telcos, media services and other things like that, again, you're most probably using Couchbase again without really realizing it. So when you look at the sort of the capabilities and map that across to what our NoSQL benefits are all about, is and Francis highlighted sort of caching. Caching is something that we've always done. We started as a cache technology for being able to perform very fast access to data. But we're a document database, and that document database gives us some really, really cool flexibility and capabilities. The simple adoption, where we find a lot of customers start with a caching use case, move to source of truth system of record, and evolve over time once they've found that sort of niche. And we become literally a starting point, and then just after use cases expand. And I'll explain some of the areas in a second of what we do. And then compatibility, we make it really easy for people that live in the SQL world. When you're in a database technology or data-driven technology, we've made our language that we use called NQL, it's spelt N1QL, but it's basically a next generation query language, but it looks and feels to a large percent just like SQL. And with the new analytics capabilities that Don Chamberlain, who was the originator of SQL, who came out with SQL++ for more the analytics use cases, we've already integrated that into our capabilities. And then speed of development. Lots of people want to be able to get very rapid, similar functionality of getting my application ported from one database technology to another. Number one is get your data moved across, but number two is make your application experience the same, if not better. And being able to do that agile development and swing the applications across very fast is one of the key pieces. Plus also schemas. Most database technologies, I think many of you are familiar with, the Oracles and other technologies of this world. When they're in the relational database world, they're very rigid in their schema piece. And today, lots of people are now adding new features and functionalities, which mean that you need to have a capability to change your schema very, very fast. And then performance, we're in memory. We have a memory first architecture in what we do. We can distribute anywhere, so we have global replication capabilities inside our technology. We have multiple different topologies that we can support, ring topologies, in essence, peer-to-peer and distributed topologies as well. And then, as it says there, the operational simplicity, we also have the ability to make it really simple for people to operationally make sure that systems stay up and running, so we can replicate data in the event of cheap nodes failing or devices failing, and keeping the service up and running. We're also now seeing, where you see Kubernetes operator and cloud support, that economic conversation about scalability into economic. Everybody's now looking at cloud technologies. As a telco, if you're not providing your own, you're most probably looking at ways of doing it with some of the larger cloud providers, or doing a bit of both, doing your own as well as doing something with the larger cloud providers in the form of the AWS's, Azure or Google. And so Kubernetes and people looking at the container approach to doing things and being able to rapidly deploy new functionality, new capabilities, scaling up and scaling out, is one of those key sort of aspects for many technologies. And when you look at our platform, when you now bring our platform as such, From a Couchbase technology, for those of you who don't appreciate or haven't experienced Couchbase at all, as I say, we're a bit of a secret source engine behind a lot of very large organizations. But we are a single platform. We are a node-based architecture. You give your nodes a capability and feature and functionality. But it's into where we've got distance, scalability, and memory-first architectures. Going out to the next round, we're basically also deal with no transactions and ACID transaction capability that a lot of people have been relying on for doing financial or specific activities based on transaction model or subscription model as an example. And replication inside the system, but also between systems, is absolutely key for us. And then when you look at our services, as in the types of nodes that we deploy, we have key value for that high performance caching engine. We've then added indexing and query capabilities, the query in the purple section. We've added full text search and analytics. And again, this all sits in one Couchbase ecosystem. And then also when you've got business rules, maybe you've got GDPR test outs, or you've got certain types of when data either needs to be expired or you need to go and do validations and checks inside your system, you can build business rules and eventing checks inside the system. And then the one really smart piece, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, because this is where we are helping several of our organizations, telco specifically in certain use cases, is our mobile capability. So you can actually take a skinny version of your database with you. And if you're thinking about subscribers and users and other people who want to have, in essence, portability of their data, we've got companies like airlines using it, so they can be up in the air and have a portable version of their data, so they don't have to be connected if they don't need to be. We've got patient record systems with large healthcare organizations using it to be able to communicate with their patients, so that patients, again, if they're not in a good reception area, they can still see when their next appointments and other things like that are coming up. We've also got field service organizations going out into the field, but then working as a team, they can hook together. And there's a really unique thing I'll talk about in a second about our mobile capability. But it's all about data, putting data at the center of it all, but making it available in all those locations is one of the things that we are very, very sort of keen and focused on at the moment with Couchbase. And as I say, it's a technology that can link with other types of database technologies, either feeding from or feeding to. We've got full capabilities around security aspects, and then we've made it really easy for that deployment for the cloud. When you look at our technology, one of the things about our focus is on the left-hand side, that Couchbase Lite, which is our device, our mobile device technology. One of the really cool things about that technology is when you are disconnected, but you are already working in a work group, you can actually do a peer-to-peer communication. So we've got companies like GE use us. We've got a couple of telcos now using us for field service deployments. When things aren't going right, everybody gets their work orders, but then they can work together to do their pieces of the activity, and then combine those in the field until service is resumed. They can go peer-to-peer over Bluetooth, as an example, to go and create that sort of activity if sort of service is out. It doesn't stop them from working in a sort of team-related way. And as I say, all this is hooked together by what we call our sync gateway. So as much as we can distribute large Couchbase servers, but we also have a lot of organizations now looking at things like sync gateway, going to stores and centers where a lot of your point of sale services and systems could well be Android or iOS device engine devices, and therefore you can actually have a mobile powered shop, basically synchronizing data backwards and forwards between your main data centers as well. So for new revenue streams and other aspects associated with that. With regards to a few customer use cases, for example, if anybody here is with people like BT or Sky, we generally look after a lot of the subscription services. We're sort of embedded as part of the empowering enabling of set-top boxes in BT. With Sky, a lot of it is around identity management and subscription. Sky, if anybody watches Game of Thrones, they had a major outage a few years back when the second series came out, and the subscription service crashed big time. That was based on a relational database technology. They've very rapidly switched over to Couchbase as the subscription service for all their identity management and subscription management, and they've not had any outage ever since that time. Touch wood, obviously, as you go through, but it was one of those things where they needed the high performance, and Couchbase really ticked boxes for them. You'll see a lot of media companies obviously associated there, certainly in the top line with regards to Comcast, DirecTV as well, and some of the key aspects. But you've also got technologies such as Verizon using it with their new ThingSpace, their IoT platform. So again, getting involved in billions of devices, basically data points, and connecting all that sort of stuff together to make sure that the Verizon's network is performing in the way that it should do, and providing the services. I'm not going to go through all of those ones. We've also got, if you're in the telco space, you most probably recognize some names such as Amdocs and Cisco. Amdocs does we have an OEM capability with Amdocs with their MS360 platform that they provide to lots of telcos around the globe. And then Cisco as well with their media broadcasting, billion user sessions, or 100 billion, user sessions per year, and other technology like Viber with regards to the different types of media services that they can offer as well. All rely on Couchbase as really the engine behind and helping drive some of the service lines that they're working with. Going to take it back to basics for a second. For some of you may well be very familiar with Couchbase. Some of you may feel that that there's certain things that you're pretty familiar with. But I want to bring it back to some simple basics. I put the Couchbase. If taking one of Francis's previous diagrams and putting the Couchbase logos, if you deploy Couchbase in a well-designed manner, you can have Couchbase at the data center, Couchbase in distributed points, but also Couchbase at the edge through our mobile capability. So taking that skinny version of your database with you. And certain use cases we could go through are sort of, what if a customer then says, right, I want to activate a customer. They can make that request through the internet or through a local device. Then once the agent in the data center can then basically receive that request, action that request. Sorry, the animation is sort of sliding across the screen a little bit, but hopefully you're seeing the builds. The wheels kick in, the activation kicks in, but then that activation then can go back out to the device and provide the activation for that device, whether it's your mobile device or whatever. But equally, you can, if you think smartly about it, and some of the things and themes that we're starting to see from the telcos, which is, how do I provide value-added services? How do I embed some more data? How do I provide more data to those? So what we're now starting to see is some of the organizations looking at embedding Couchbase Mobile or Couchbase Lite into some of their applications now, because it gives them much more portability and capability as they go forwards. And then, and equally, if you think about it, because we're a document database, and if you think about a document database, it's formatted, that people talk about in JSON, but it's very readable. And if you think about a document database, and you think about a document, quite often is let's say it's my monthly bills, or it's my profile settings. Those documents can be loaded onto my mobile device and be portable, be captured with me and taken with me, and I can be, in essence, I can be certainly fed with information, but I don't have to be online all the time. I can look at my bills offline if I feel I want to. All that sort of stuff can be synchronized. So suddenly I'm giving my users better sort of value add to the capabilities in that sort of capability there. Then what if we have a service outage? And this is where, I want to be able to turn around and go, right, got a service outage. We need to go and get the team to alert it. Hopefully that's been picked up by either sensors that are out there that are not responding, therefore that creates an alert inside your own monitoring system itself, but that should automate a process to go and trigger finding who are the right people I'm going to dispatch that to. So I'll get my field engineers, I'll give the guys through the mobile application, I'll distribute their work orders. Hopefully they're in a place where they can go and receive them. And then when they finally get to site, let's say the service is down, one of the cool things, as I said earlier, is you can now work as a team, even if you don't have service. You can now, I've got my work orders on my devices in a very simplistic way. I can now do peer-to-peer, where I can actually say, have I done this bit? Have I done that bit? We developed that, as I say, with a few of the airlines and some of the large industrial engineering type firms that found that that in essence, in big industrial factories and the ones that create a lot of disruption to Wi-Fi signals and things along those lines, Bluetooth was actually quite a resilient platform. So we built that into our capability to allow people to basically continue to work. So again, then I can sign off on my work order. I can basically send that back again. Work order then goes back through the sync gateway because I've got that ability to go and send the data back, and I can confirm that everything is done. And that's one of the things about Couchbase is you can rely on the way in which you do things in the center in a very similar way in which you do things at the edge. And it makes it a lot easier for organizations to sort of, in essence, come up with what are those workflows, what are those data flows that need to be put out there, whether it's for a user's perspective or whether it's for the telco operation perspective, how those sorts of things come together. So in summary, it's really all about agility and flexibility. We have organizations very rapidly turning on their capabilities. We've added things such as full text search and other aspects associated with doing that. We've also go into the performance of scale. It's a memory first architecture. So we try and keep as much data inside memory to give you high performance of access to the most recently requested or most recently used data. We auto distribute, so as you scale out, we auto distribute the data to make it faster as you scale beyond. So we have pretty much linear scalability in what we do with a lot of our customers. And in essence, some of the terms in there, unless you know Couchbase, you may not appreciate some of the terms, but things such as ephemeral or in-memory database buckets, basically dealing with the memory capability and the high performance internally to our system. And again, also ACID transactions. Now people are moving to doing financial transactions and other aspects as well. No longer are we being seen as just a through point to go to a final database that deals with those. We're now being seen as a valid replacement for the likes of Oracle and other types of databases that are out there today, because we are being seen as a full suite with high levels of resiliency and scalability. Managing with ease, very simple, straightforward. We have some great capabilities. We got the cross data center replication for geo-distributed high availability and disaster recovery. We have natural auto failover built in depending on your configuration. And then finally, that cloud to the edge piece there with regards to offline application support. We got the ability to do the querying either at the center system through applications or even on the edge, very simple, identical ways in which you go and search and review your data, whether you're connected or not. And then ultimately making sure that everything is done from in essence, in a secure manner, making sure that anything that's done in the center, role-based access control and security is absolutely central to what we do to give confidence that our technology can be used in the correct and proper manner. That's in essence the sort of, I suppose, the intro to Couchbase that we've got. I'm going to stop there and say thank you very much on that side of things, and then hand back to you, Jeremy.
That's great, Chris. Thank you, and Francis, for a rapid tour around firstly the opportunity, and secondly a really fascinating suite of solutions. I've learned an awful lot from that, but if you want to learn more and you've got a question, thank you for the questions you've already sent. Please keep them coming. We're going to come to those now. The first question that I want to put is going to be to you, Chris. The questioner is asking, what effect on data and security does the introduction of the ESIM technology have for telecom companies? The 5G strategy rolls out.
Yes, so with eSIM coming out now, I think a lot of the telcos are offering it as options. A lot of the devices are enabled to allow that side of things to happen. But in essence, the effect on data is one thing, which is if I've got multiple profiles using my eSIM technology where I've got a a personal, a device holding my personal, in essence, profile as well as my business profile, I'm going to be generating, in essence, two lots of data that obviously need to be handled in a correct and proper manner. And obviously, eSIM technology is I suppose the newer way in which people are wanting to basically go and get enabled really quickly. eSIM allows you to obviously provision much faster. eSIM will allow you to theoretically have multiple profiles on your devices should you so wish, and therefore theoretically that's going to be generating more and more data, admittedly from one collection point, but ultimately you want to be able to look at that data in a sort of more sort of personal way as well. But the 5G piece as well, moving from 4G to 5G. I'm not going to teach the people from telco organizations to suck eggs, but that is theoretically it's going to drive a massive amount of additional data, potentially. In essence, we saw the changes from, in essence, from the 3G to 4G, the dynamic shift, and now the 5G, and with IoT becoming a big focus point for a lot of organizations, and in essence, that sort of digital twin thing where you're now not just talking about people, you're talking about buildings, devices, and other things like that, where sensors and other things like that are going to be also firing information at you. Ultimately, all this is going to sort of, in essence, going to be a way in which, in essence, IoT devices can also become eSIM enabled as potentially as well. And how I can go and get those sorts of things sort of distributed out there. So I see it's going to have a significant effect on that, as well as the security around that data. You're going to have to be absolutely on your game to make sure that the right people are getting access to that information should you be going out there and trying to glean lots of information from things. And then compliancy as well. Do you have the rights to go and get that data? Have you been able to get the right levels of capabilities? We've seen a lot of that with things like GDPR.
It's a fascinating area, and I'm sure one that we could dive into further, but time is against us, so let's keep moving. Francis, I'd like to come to you for an overview on the next question, which is the questioner wants to know, do you believe media services are going to be the primary revenue drivers for telcos in 10 years? That's asking a lot. Lift your eyes that far up the road, but go on, give it a go.
I'll turn the question around. I think the key thing is to recognize that connectivity on its own is inherently a commodity. It connects two things. The value of, as we can see from, even we go back to the age-old thing, you weren't interested in the connectivity of a telco. You were interested in what it did, the application that it did for you. So I think I think the important thing is that telcos need to attach their value to applications. Media is an example of one type of application that we can all readily realize. But I think more generally, telcos have to become attaching themselves to the value of an application, of which media is one of them, because that's the thing that you and I, as consumers or enterprises, value. It's what does connectivity do for you? It's not connectivity on its own.
Yeah,
so it's probably a way of addressing it, but I think that is the challenge for telcos: get beyond connectivity.
Yeah. That probably answers the point that it doesn't really sort of direct the question into IoT. But Chris, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you believe that media services are going to be a primary revenue driver for telcos?
I think it could be. I think it absolutely could be. So we've seen, obviously, the likes of BT have turned themselves into a much more of a media company now. We've started seeing companies like Telefonica and others to media distribution points. I think what was a couple of the phrases that people used to say is, I've finished Netflix now, what do I watch? It's like while lockdown had kicked in. The other thing that I think is going to be possibly that release is the amount of films, programs, and things like that have been pent up. The amount of, I suppose, things like entertainment that's been not released, will create a spike of activity, and people need to get on top of that to act as a distribution point for that sort of piece. So I don't know how many people here have multiple media accounts, but you know, I look here. Personally, I've got BT TV, I've got Discovery Plus, I've got Virgin Media, I've got a bunch of different things that are basically popping up here, and they just become a monthly subscription. I'll eat as much as I possibly can from that side of things. It's how do you monetize it, and how do you make sure that the content is the content that people want to watch is going to be the next conversation, which is
fair point.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm going to stay with you for a moment. Prasanna is asking how many of the telcos are able to integrate data across network, BSS/OSS systems and customer transactions, and use it for monetizing and improving customer experience and service assurance. It's a long question, but I mean, basically, it boils down to how many are integrating successfully.
That's a really, some of the telcos that we've talked to are starting to open up as to what their challenges are. So I think what we're finding is that BSS and OSS is certainly coming together, but trying to turn it into more of a customer 360 and putting the customer at the center of it all. We're starting to see a big shift in that direction now with quite a lot of the telcos. Because in essence, at the end of the day, that subscription service or customers using your services is the lifeblood of the organization. So I think how many telcos are able to do it? I would say there are challenges for most of the traditional telcos that we've spoken to, because they've got a lot of legacy systems that are just not quite right to go into that mode. And to Francis's point about that sort of economic scalability, being able to pick up something you've got massive years of investment in, pick it up and possibly make use of the cloud to make it work. Some of those things aren't even ready for the cloud either. So that becomes a real challenge as well. So how many are able to integrate? I suppose it's one of the things I would say to most people looking at their infrastructure is how much of your stuff is cloud ready? Could you make it portable if you had to? If you could, you can get the economic potential, and then you got to make sure you're really good on your negotiation in the cloud side of things if you're not the cloud provider yourself. So in essence, those sorts of things kick in. But if you find that a lot of the stuff is so legacy that you cannot get away from it, lots of mainframe and other things, and we do quite a lot of mainframe migration with some other organizations as well. It takes time. You've really got to plan it, and you've got to do it in as sensitive and as unaffecting to your current services as you possibly can, and that needs careful planning, no doubt about it.
Chris, you've teed that up nicely. I'm going to ask the next question to Francis. The questioner wants to know, how will 5G and Edge change the basis on which data is stored and used in telcos?
I think the critical thing, a lot of it said about 5G, but I think the most important aspect of 5G is actually edge. Things occurring at the edge, and things that are being done in a way that are autonomous at the edge or require a fast reaction. What fundamentally changes is the need for things to act and behave without reference to the center. Traditionally, BSS and OSS systems and IoT systems as well are very much sort of hub and spoke. Things occur at the edge, and the data is brought back to the center for some kind of decision. Similarly, most services that a telco provides, and I'm not talking about telephone calls here, but in terms of connectivity or aspects of that, they're very semi-static services. They're not particularly dynamic. So I connect A to B, and I continue to pass data between A and B. 5G and Edge is a much more dynamic environment, or sorry, more accurately, has the potential to be a much more dynamic environment. So there's a lot talked about network slicing. If I need to do network slicing, a lot of the aspects of how I manage that network slice on a microsecond by microsecond basis needs to be at the edge. The data that supports decision making about that network slicing and the way a service heals or scales in terms of the customer needs to be at the edge. So that ability to not simply statically configure and just remain in place, but to be able to dynamically evolve that, whilst at the same time requiring that data to be available to look across the whole big picture. I've managed one service. I now need to look at what is my overall behavior of 1,000 services, a million services. What do I need to change about that and those aspects? So it's very much that need to be able to support both data immediately as we're doing something live, as it were, and the ability to bring that data back and make larger scale or intelligent decisions about policy in the future.
Fair enough. Chris, there's a great question here from Bruce about mission critical applications. I make no apology for the fact it's a long one because it's a good one. So I'm going to read that over now. Chris, this is really directed, I think, for you. For mission critical applications, says Bruce, what role does the platform play in the management of outages across different mediums, brackets, Wi-Fi and cellular, to enable business continuity communications to fail over across multiple technologies and ensure applications continue to work and the data stays safe and accurate? A lot to take in there. Can you give me your best shot on that in a minute, because I'm conscious of time?
Okay, Bruce, I'm going to give it my best shot, but equally I'm happy to play a catch up with you over LinkedIn or something if you want. So I've eaten 10 seconds already. So biggest thing I would say is, number one, dealing with a platform that can handle failures inside the platform, but also when an application needs to start retrying other aspects as well. In other words, the application handing over from either a microservices or application to application in a load balanced way, basically making sure that the platform underneath it can handle that and the request coming in. Ensuring also consistency of that data. So absolute consistency, and what I mean by that is that sort of that tolerance of data and conflict resolution. Should data be suddenly theoretically out of sync, making sure that the platform you have chosen, certainly in the database world, can handle the conflict resolution when things come back up to normal again, so that you can work out what data wins. Basically, what if somebody goes and does some modification, or how you merge that data in an effective way. And as I say, as Bruce, you highlighted, what if I'm going over Wi-Fi for some communication, I'm going over fixed line for another, or broadband for another piece of communication? Things are going to be coming in its possibly different speeds, and being able to use the technology behind it that can give you confidence that it can reorder those things, even though they might come in at different speeds. That's absolutely key as well. So that's something we've definitely built in as considerations in our technology. You'll find it in lots of other people's technology, but trying to make sure it is effective across all of those sort of failure scenarios and latency scenarios that are going to naturally be built in with the different routes that data can take, are going to be absolutely key for any decision that people take.
Admirably covered in a minute, Chris. I think that's fantastic. It sounds to me, though, that there's probably scope for you and Bruce to have a further conversation. Chris, I'm coming back to you. How important is the drive towards personalization when considering implementing new systems?
I would say we're an 11-year-old company, and the very first types of use cases we got into were about user profiles, customer profiles. So in essence, personalization is something that we've always helped our organizations with. And it is a key driver for us. Customer 360 is sort of like I suppose the catchphrase that we use, but also the industry has sort of got some familiarity with. Making sure that you understand what the users are doing, so that you can sensitively communicate to them things that they might like, things that trends and other activities may make sense, rather than making it like somebody's watching you from afar type thing. Is basically giving you something that gives you that sort of level of personalization that says, actually, I am interested in this sort of thing. So we do a lot of work with organizations around what we call that customer 360 platform. Lots of use cases around how that side of things comes in. If you think about Sky is a perfect example. your subscription services, your viewing preferences are all recorded using our technology, and then Sky then does its own algorithms and other things like that to say, hey, you watch this, surely you'll be interested in something like this. Those sorts of things where it's nice and comfortable versus that uncomfortable watching, saying, where things pop up on adverts on websites that you go, oh, hang on a second, where did that come from? But yeah, we like to play on the good side of things with businesses, and again, that's down to business rules, obviously, on that. But we certainly enable it.
Fascinating. Guys, I can't thank you enough. You've covered such an enormous amount of ground, but sadly, we are out of time. We've been from end to end, I think, in an hour of data-driven telecoms. But don't forget now to bookmark our website at vanillaplus.com. And from tomorrow, you can stream this entire discussion there. It just remains there for me to say a big thank you to our speakers who've taken all of your questions and more besides, which we will pass on to them because time has been against us. Chris Bridgeland from Couchbase. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thanks, Francis.
And indeed, thank you too to Francis Haysom from Appledore. We really value your guidance, Francis.
Thank you, Jeremy and Chris. It's been a great discussion.
It's been good. You've both handled that brilliantly. Most of all, ladies and gentlemen, though, I want to thank you. Thank you for joining us wherever you are around the world. So until the next time, from all of us here, bye for now.